All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to be focusing on first steps for our international undergraduate students. My name is Grace Fuller. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve as the Interim Assistant Director of International Experience and Engagement here at the International Services and Engagement Office, otherwise referred to as ISEO. And I'll hand it over to my colleague Vanessa to introduce herself.
Hello, my name is Vanessa Cisneros, she, her, and I'm an international student advisor here at ISEO. Looking forward to getting to know all of you.
And on behalf of ISEO, we are so excited to welcome our new cohort of students. We have been doing some of these pre-arrival webinars for our graduate students, and we're really excited to start interacting and supporting our undergraduate students as well. So such a warm welcome, and we're so excited to support you as you begin your journey to UC San Diego. A little bit of housekeeping before we begin. So you are in listen-only mode, which means you can hear us, but we can't hear you. However, you can still ask questions using the Zoom Q&A feature on your Zoom menu bar. If for some reason we aren't able to get to your questions today, know that you can always contact us via icontact.ucsd.edu. And finally, we are recording, so you'll be able to view this webinar recording as well as all other webinar recordings at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. If you haven't used that Q&A feature before, here's a little screenshot of what that will look like. We do recommend to try to wait for your questions because it is likely that we might answer your question during the content of today's presentation. However, I know I myself sometimes am anxious because I'm worried that I'll forget a question. So if that's you, no problem at all. You can go ahead and submit that question, but we will have dedicated time at the end of today's webinar to answer those Q&A questions. So a brief snapshot of how we'll spend our time together today. First, we'll do an overview of the International Services and Engagement Office. Then we'll have some reminders from undergraduate admissions. We'll talk more in detail about how to apply for your Form I-20 or Form DS 2019. We'll end with some approaching deadlines and reminders, upcoming webinars and additional resources, and as noted, finish with an open question and answer. So, meet ISEO, or the International Services and Engagement Office. So at ISEO, we are fortunate to have a number of dedicated staff, as well professional staff, including our student staff, here to support you. So we are your one-stop shop for all services and programs for international students, scholars, and families. We provide immigration advising as well as advising on non-immigration topics to really help you understand how to best navigate your program and succeed at UC San Diego. We are excited for you to be able to come visit us in person, but before then, we're excited to support you through these pre-arrival webinars, through our iNew student newsletters, as well as helping you navigate iServices to request some of those visa documents. Aside from advising and issuing immigration documents, we also offer many different types of events and workshops to really support you holistically as you adjust to campus and student life, and really hoping to enrich your academic, research, and intercultural experience here. So while you might first interact with us as the visa office, we really hope that we can be a resource for you. And even if we aren't the ones to answer your questions, we pride ourselves in working really collaboratively across campus to connect you with the folks who might be able to answer your question. Now, enough about us. I always love to talk about who are our students. Oops. So we have such a diverse and rich pool at UC San Diego of our international students. So as you can see, we have over 8,000 currently enrolled international students and over 2,000 students that we support working after graduation. So our service population is over 10,000 international students. Over 4,000 undergraduate students, and you can see some of our most common majors here, as well as you can see the breakdown by college. So UC San Diego is unique in the sense that it is a college-based system at a UC school. You can also see our top 10 places of origin, noting that we have actually over 100 countries represented. So while we definitely have some countries where lots of students come from, we do have over 100 countries here at UC San Diego. And so we are here, along with the entire campus community, to offer you a heartfelt welcome to campus. We like to think of ISEO hopefully as your new home away from home, a place where you can meet others from around the world, learn from one another, explore your interests, and above all, feel welcome. So whatever this next year might look like, ISEO plans to extend the very same warm welcome that we have been for years. And so you can meet many of the different students that you see pictured here. All right, so a few first steps. So number one, first and foremost, accepting that offer of admission. You'll do this by logging into your applicant portal and completing your enrollment checklist. So as a part of your enrollment checklist, that will be accepting your offer of admission. That's a key piece that kind of unlocks everything else, I'd say. And then we also have completing your California residency for tuition purposes. That it might be required for you. And if it is, that's another piece that is pretty important in order for you to proceed to the next steps. I do want to note, some students will have questions about certain final documents. Some of these documents might not be available until after the July 1st deadline. So things such as your IB exams, your A levels, or other national exam results. Please know that our colleagues in admissions know that for our international students, these might become available later. And so there's no need to panic. We understand that, we're aware of that, but just send them when you can. And you'll actually receive updates via your applicant portal with more detailed instructions in both how to report them as well as what is still required. So an applicant portal is a great place to kind of check back and see what is required there and the best way that you can get that information to admissions. I'm just going to take a note and put that here for easy reference. Okay. Now, once you accept your offer of admission, 2 to 3 days later, you will receive an email asking to create your Triton Link Active Directory and Duo accounts. So the creation of your Active Directory will provide you with your UC San Diego PID and email. This is very important because you will be asked for your PID and you will be communicated via your UCSD email throughout your time at UC San Diego. These are kind of two keys that unlock the system of UC San Diego. So do know that it can take a couple days after you accept your offer of admission, but it's really important to set up these required accounts because these will be the login that you will then use to access almost all UC San Diego systems and platforms. And then finally, I also want to highlight inewdegreestudent.ucsd.edu. So this is shifting gears a little bit. We talked a little bit about undergraduate admissions. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about ISEO. So this is our website. But we have really tried to break down the step-by-step process in the order of what you need to do to apply for your Form I-20 or DS 2019. Vanessa will get into that into a moment. But if you go to inewdegreestudent.ucsd.edu, you can actually see here that the first under step 1, applying for your F1 or J1 certificate of eligibility, is that drawer, accept admission and complete required account setup. So we have ordered the information in the process of how you'll need to complete it. And hopefully by following it, it's a step-by-step checklist that will lead you to the next step and then the successful completion of obtaining these documents. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Vanessa, to talk a little bit more about applying for your US visa and getting started.
Thank you, Grace, for all that great information. Okay, yeah, so let's talk about how to get started on applying for your F1 or J1 student visa. Here at ISEO, we break the visa process down into 6 steps. The first step is to request and receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from ISEO. This is also required for CVIS transfer students. I currently want to point out that if you are in the United States as an F1 or J1 student, This step 1, is also required of you. If you're attending this webinar and thinking, I don't need an F1 or J1 visa because I already have one, note that you will still need to request the Form I-20 or DS 2019 from ISEO in order to attend and study at UC San Diego. So the information in today's webinar will be relevant for you. The second step, if you are in need of an F1 or J1 visa stamp in order to enter the United States, then the next step once you receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 will be to schedule your visa interview. This will involve submitting the visa application, the Form DS 160 to your local embassy or consulate, and paying the required fees. After that, for step 3, you will then attend your visa interview upon the scheduled date. Upon successful completion of the visa interview and application process, the U.S. Embassy or Consulate will provide you with your F1 or J1 visa stamp. This is step 4. You will then be able to plan your travel to the United States. For step 5, the visa process continues. Once you have your Form I-20 or DS 2019, plus your F1 or J1 visa stamp, you need to successfully enter the United States. This is called applying for entry at the port of entry and is where you will go through customs. And finally, step 6, upon successfully passing through customs, you will then be able to arrive at UC San Diego. The last step in the visa process is to arrive at UC San Diego and complete what's called the SEVIS check-in in order to activate your F1 J1 status. This will be a form that you submit to our office showing proof that you have successfully entered the US under your F1 or J1 visa. Once you have submitted your SEVIS check-in form, we will activate your F or J status. You will be an active status international student in the United States. Today, we'll be looking at just the first step in the visa process, which is how to get your Form I-20 or DS 2019. This Thursday, April 3rd at 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, we'll be holding our next pre-arrival webinar where we will discuss the next 3 steps in this process, which is the visa application process. So we'll look at once you have received your Form I-20 or DS 2019, how do you actually apply for your F1 or J1 visa stamp? As a reminder, the information we will discuss today is outlined in inewdegreestudent.ucsd.edu under step 1. So if for any reason you need to step away or unable to watch to completion, all of the information is thoroughly outlined there. But of course, you'll get some additional information if you stick around with us today. Before we take a closer look at how to request your Form I-20 or DS 2019, I want to pause and say again, if you are currently in the United States on an F1 visa and hoping to transfer your SEVIS record to UC San Diego, perhaps maybe you're attending a community college and you're planning to start at UCSD as a transfer student this fall, you already have an F1 visa. If you already have your F1 visa, you are still required to request a Form I-20 from our office. In addition to requesting a Form I-20 from our office, there are other steps you will need to take to move or transfer your SEVIS record from your current school to UC San Diego. So if you are currently attending school in the US on an F1 visa, I also want to encourage you to join us on Thursday, May 8th for our SEVIS transfer pre-arrival webinar. Visit inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu to register. And just a point, we have repeated this now twice because it is so important for our students who already have their F1 visa and are already maintaining an I-20 or a J1 and a DS 2019 to understand there is a transfer process that you must take with your current institution and our institution. So ultimately, you will follow the instructions we have today to obtain your transfer Form I-20 or potentially DS 2019. So it's really important. For those who will be applying for an F or J visa for the first time, let me briefly explain what the Form I-20 or DS 2019 is. You must first have received your Form I-20 in order to apply for an F1 visa stamp at your local US consulate or embassy. Or you must have received your Form DS 2019 in order to apply for a J1 visa stamp at your local embassy or consulate. This is because the Form I-20 or DS 2019 is your certificate of visa eligibility. In other words, the Form I-20 or DS 2019 lets the consulate know that you have been admitted to UC San Diego and that you are seeking a US visa in order to come to the United States as a student. If you are not sure which visa you should request, an F or J, see our guide at inewstudent.ucsd.edu. This will help you determine which is most appropriate for you. Generally, most of our students attend. Our undergraduate students are on an F visa, but please explore this resource to confirm which is best for you. So, in summary, you must receive your Form I-20 or DS 2019 first before you can apply for your visa stamp. You can request your Form I-20 or DS 2019 from iservices.ucsd.edu. Once you have received it, then you will have the information you need to begin your visa stamp application process. At inewdegreestudent.ucsd.edu under step 1, you will find complete instructions for how to complete your UCSD account setup so that you can access iServices. Again, you need to have your UCSD account set up completely before you can access iServices. You will also see instructions for how to submit an iServices and also what documents and information is required for you to submit in your I-20 or DS 2019 request. We will be reviewing all of these steps today together, but please refer back to this site prior to and while submitting your request. In order to get this process started, obtaining an I-20 or DS 2019, you need to ensure that you have access to iServices. At inewdegreestudent.ucsd.edu, you'll find everything you need to do in order to gain access to iServices, the system you will use to request your new admit I-20 or DS 2019. iServices can be accessed by logging in at iservices.ucsd.edu with your student SSO PID or Active Directory credentials. It is important to note that in order to access iServices, you must have completed your UC San Diego account setup. This means you have completed your enrollment checklist, set up your Triton Active Directory, received your UCSD email and personal identification number, aka PID, and set up your Duo account. You will gain access to iServices 2 to 3 days after completing all of these steps. So there's a lot of steps to complete in the process, and once you've completed all of them, you'll wait another 2 to 3 days to make sure that your information is in the system to grant you access. So be patient, and as soon as you have access, you'll be able to submit. This is what iServices.ucsd.edu will look like. Please only log in using the yellow login box. Do not have a UCSD email account or network ID. If you use the red area because you're unable to log in through the yellow box, it's going to create a bit of confusion for yourself and also for the office and ultimately take a longer time. So please log in after you've completed all of the steps from the previous slide using the login button that's highlighted here in green. If you're unable to log in after following all of the instructions, you can visit these sites for additional iServices support. So you can find iServices support at inewdegreestudent.ucsd.edu, and there's a section for iServices instructions for students page that'll take you to additional instructions and troubleshooting information. After you've exhausted that option, you can head to icontact.ucsd.edu and you will find tech support iServices assistance. And in this scenario, if you are required to email us because after following all of the instructions and the troubleshooting, you're still unable to log in with that yellow button, you'll send us an email and include screenshots and a description of what's going on, and we will help you. Once you are able to log into iServices, it will look like this. You will select starting a new program at UC San Diego, highlighted on the left in yellow here. From there, you will select which new admit request you will submit. Remember, if you will begin a degree program at UC San Diego in F visa status, you will submit the new admit I-20 request. If you will begin a degree program with UC San Diego in J visa status, you will submit the new admit DS 2019 request. If you are in the US in a different non-immigrant visa status like F2, H4, L2, but plan to change to F1 or J1, please schedule an appointment with us and an ISEO advisor at icontact@ucsd.edu to discuss further. Be sure to submit all required e-forms within the iServices new admit request. Incomplete submissions with missing e-forms cannot be processed. So you can see here that the new admit request, all of those e-forms are a required component to your submission. If you do not complete those, then your request remains incomplete. Finally, as you see highlighted at the very bottom, be sure you submit the submission confirmation. The submission confirmation is what completes your request and sends your request to our office to review. So if all of those are completed and you've submitted the final submission confirmation, it comes to us advisors to be able to process for you. A pro tip, funding requirements. So one of the biggest hurdles or the reasons why requests get set to incomplete is because the funding information is not what it needs to be in the request. So we have in the e-form, you have two documents that you have to confirm, the financial documents, and you upload them. But you're going to need to thoroughly review the requirements for the financial requirements before you submit this. So currently we're processing lots of these and it's a lot of information, but if students do not review it, we cannot process and we have to set to incomplete. So do yourself a favor and us a favor so we can process it as soon as possible. Go to iNewDegreeStudent.ucsd.edu and you'll find the link for financial funding information highlighted under that second drop-down box under step 1. And then you'll see the image on the far right, which is the I-20 DS 2019 funding requirements for 2025 and 2026. Another pro tip about the funding requirements, how to use that website. Specifically, you want to be sure that you understand how much funding you're required to show for your I-20 or DS 2019 request. For our undergraduate students, I have this here on the left, and you see the total amount there is $76,989. That's the amount of funding that students are required to demonstrate with their financial document uploads. So it's always a good idea to know how much you need to show in funding so you know what the target is. Now, the second thing you need to do is understand what types of funding can you show to meet that requirement. So we have the acceptable sources of funding on our funding pages, and we have just an example on the right-hand side here. We see personal funds, checking or savings account, and we see the second column, do we accept that? Yes. And then we have the criteria. On the far right, it is a lot of criteria. So when we, your advisors, are reviewing your request, we have to look for these things. And if they are not in what you've uploaded, we have to set to incomplete. So my advice would be to thoroughly review the criteria of your financial documents with yourself, or if you have a caretaker or an older brother or sister who might want to help you, review this information together so that when you submit, you know that it's already meeting the requirements. If you take the time up front to review this, it will ensure that your request is processed as quickly as possible. We have another pro tip on CVIS transfer eligibility. We will do a whole webinar on this in May. I'm sure some of you are very excited and eager to get started on this process as soon as possible. So the CVIS transfer eligibility is we ask about it in one of the e-forms within the request. So you can see that highlighted in the small box on the left. And we have additional information for you to help understand if you're eligible for that CVIS transfer or not, if you're not sure. So you can look at iNewDegreeStudent.ucsd.edu. Under that second drop-down box in the documents required for submission, we have a link to CVIS transfer information. And it takes you to the page on the far right-hand side, which details all the information about CVIS transfer eligibility if you're not sure. So if you don't want to wait until May to attend the webinar, which you definitely should, but if you don't want to wait that long and you want to get started on this process, please review this resource, because if you submit for a new admit request and you say you don't want to see this transfer, and then you change your mind after one's been issued, you will wait the processing time again. There's no way to rush that. So take your time to review it now to be sure that you are or not eligible. The processing time for your new admit request will depend on a number of different factors and unfortunately cannot be guaranteed. But we can confirm the processing time for these requests is approximately 15 business days from the date you successfully submit a complete and accurate, that means no further updates or edits are needed, new admit request in iServices. New admit requests that are set to incomplete for additional information, updated information, or clarification will take longer. For this reason, it is vital to review all website and e-form instructions before submitting your new admit request. If your application is incomplete or invalid, you will be contacted by an ISEO advisor via your UCSD email with instructions to resubmit or add clarifying information to your request in iServices. Please note that the speed at which your new admit request is completed is directly connected to how well you review and follow the instructions on our website on iServices. Take your time when submitting so you do not have to correct errors later. I would say generally taking a day or two longer to review the financial documents or to discuss or to be sure that it's accurate will pay off in your favor, because it will mean that we can process faster and more accurately. Once your Form I-20 or DS-2019 is issued, it will be emailed to your UCSD email for access. Alternatively, you will also be able to view it in iServices. Be sure to download, print, and sign it by hand. Students often ask us, can I sign this electronically or digitally? The answer is no. The US government allows universities to electronically or digitally sign the Form I-20 or DS-2019, but for you, the student, you're required to print and sign this form by hand. You will also be required to show the printed and hand-signed document at your visa interview and when passing through customs to enter the US. Once you've received your document, please also check it for accuracy, including things like the CVIS ID number, biographical information, program information, the funding information, that it's generally correct, your DSO signature on page 1 and page 2, and also your signature. For more details on reviewing for accuracy, we have an entire drop-down box under step 1 at iNewDegreeStudent.ucsd.edu. So be sure to review that for more thorough instructions for review. All right, so that's the first step in the visa process. Once you have received your Form I-20 or DS-2019, you will have the information you need to submit your visa application to your local US Embassy or consulate. Join us this Thursday, April 3rd, for our next pre-arrival webinar, where we will take a look at the visa application process.
All right, wonderful. Thank you, Vanessa, for such good, thorough, clear information. I am going to share about some opportunities for you to already get engaged with our community here at UC San Diego before we transition to our question and answer. So first off, I want to highlight our iNew Students newsletter. So as I mentioned before, your UC San Diego email will be the way that UC San Diego communicates with you during your time as a UC San Diego student. So even now, communication is being sent to your UC San Diego email. So it's really important that you're checking that. But I just want to highlight that we are sending out iNew Student newsletters, and it helps break down this process in a timely way. So in the various weeks, you will get information that is really specific and relevant to you. So it might have instructions for how to best use iServices that Vanessa noted. It'll have reminders for upcoming Pre-Revel webinars and a lot of really good important information. So just want to plug that and look out for that in your inbox. Another resource is our welcome guide. So our welcome guide is filled with helpful checklists and interactive links dedicated to kind of three prime transition points as you're in your journey as an international student. So one checklist for before you start classes, another checklist for preparing for arrival, and then another checklist for upon arrival. So this is a great resource as you're transitioning. It kind of puts the information in a little bit easier to digest in this guide. Our Surf Check guide is actually a guide that was created for students by students, and it covers the most frequently asked questions by international students. And so when we had our current international student interns coming to the US, these were all questions they had. So topics like how to arrange transportation from the airport to campus, how to set up a phone account, how to set up a bank account. All of these questions are addressed and then built out in our Surf Check guide. And so thank you, Vanessa, who put the link into the chat, and you can reference that resource here. Okay. One additional resource is our peer mentorship program. So our Global Ambassador program is dedicated for our incoming international undergraduate students. So this is a summer-long peer mentorship program where you will be matched with current undergraduate students at UC San Diego, and you can actually choose what's most important to you in the matching process. So are you hoping to be matched with someone who's from your same home country, or are you hoping to be matched with an American student? Is sharing the same major of interest to you? Is sharing the same college of interest to you? So you can fill out this form, and then you'll be matched based on your preferences to the best of our ability. I will say that folks cite GAP, or the Global Ambassador Program, as one of the most helpful pieces in supporting their transition to UC San Diego. Having a peer that you can ask questions about how to best navigate the college system, how to find all these different resources, how to navigate UC San Diego as a whole. This is a really wonderful way to start building your community before you even physically arrive in the US. Some other ways to build your community are through our signature programs, often called iPrograms. So if you're curious about learning more, iprograms.ucsd.edu, you can kind of get a snapshot. But I'll just note that we have monthly programs so every month we will have a global coffee hour, we'll have a game night, and we'll have a crafting event. And this is really dedicated to set up a low stakes, pretty chill environment so that you can meet new people, that you can have a place where you can come, feel welcome. Usually there's some type of snacks provided, and you can start to build your community and your home away from home at UC San Diego. Other programs our highlight is our English in Action program. So that's a program where folks can practice their English conversational skills. You'll be paired with a mentor to practice your English, and usually meet weekly throughout the academic year. Triton Trekkers is our collaboration with Outback Adventures. And so it's exploring our beautiful backyard of San Diego, whether that be through kayaking the cove, or maybe hiking Potato Chip Rock, or snorkeling, or climbing Mission Gorge. There's so much to do in San Diego, and it really helps our students who may or may not have a car be able to access and explore our community. And then finally, ISAC is our International Student Advisory Council. So this is a leadership opportunity where you can meet monthly with ISEO leadership to discuss different issues that might be impacting the international student experience at UC San Diego and advocate for change. So it's open to all students, and you can learn more at isac.ucsd.edu. Okay, our iEvents calendar, I like to just mention this because it is a live calendar, and a lot of times students might bookmark this when they're wanting to see what's happening on campus. So what's going on this weekend, what's going on this week. Like I said, it's a live calendar, so it's continuously being updated and populated by our office, as well as partner offices, student orgs, etc. So it's a great way to kind of get a glimpse into what you can expect as you come to UC San Diego and the different events that we have going on. And then finally, if you would like a snapshot into what student life looks like at UC San Diego, specifically through the eyes of an international student, then I'd highly recommend for you to follow us on Instagram. So Instagram is a very common social media platform in the US and specifically used at UC San Diego. Many students are on Instagram, as well as even offices. And our Instagram is really targeted to kind of student life through the lens of an international student. So go ahead and give us a follow. I think we also might be doing an Instagram giveaway soon for our new followers. So if that's any additional incentive, we're excited to engage with you there. Okay, so a few additional resources and reminders. So there's a few things that you can start doing now. So like Vanessa just mentioned, you can begin requesting your visa documents via iServices. Again, that's iservices.ucsd.edu. And please just make note of the reminders that Vanessa outlined in terms of the login and things like that to make sure that process is as smooth as possible. You can also start applying for on-campus housing now. I will note that next week, we actually have our partners from Housing, Dining, and Hospitality join us for a webinar covering undergraduate student housing. So I may recommend that folks hang tight and actually join us for that webinar because that process can be a little bit more involved, and we'll have our colleagues from HDH there to answer all of those questions and really speak to the nuances. I'll also note that while a lot of the health immunization requirements are due in July, we also have a webinar with our colleagues from Student Health happening next week. So I believe our undergraduate student housing webinar is on April 8th. Our student health webinar is on April 10th. But again, that's where we'll go into a lot more detail about specifically insurance and immunization requirements for our international students. So make sure to join us, and there's going to be a lot of good information shared. And then finally, September is a really exciting month. So there's lots of things going on. Tuition is due, but that's usually also when move-in happens, check-in, where activate your CVIS record, and new international student orientation. So if you want to sneak peek into that, you can head to iorientation.ucsd.edu. But mainly, we're just so excited to actually meet you in person when we've been interacting with you virtually for months. Yeah, so here's a snapshot as what I was mentioning. So later this week on April 3rd, we'll have a pre-arrival webinar focusing on once you have your Form I-20 or DS 2019, how to actually apply for your US student visa. Next week, we'll cover housing and student health. The following week, we'll talk about finances and student accounts, as well as, and then the following week, we'll talk about student life and getting involved on campus. Then we have some webinars that are open to both our undergrad and graduate population. So on April 24th, we'll talk about campus safety and scams. Then on May 6th, we'll talk about getting set up in the US. We joke that this is our Cert Check Live because we've received feedback from students that they want a live webinar covering these topics. So we'll actually have our current students join us for this webinar to talk about how they set up transportation from the airport, how they set up their bank account, how they set up their phone account. And then, as Vanessa mentioned previously, on May 8th, we'll talk about the CVIS transfer process. I do like to remind folks that all webinars are recorded and posted at inewstudentwebinars.ucsd.edu. You'll click on the drawer that says Fall 2025 pre-arrival webinars. And this is a great resource because it's both where you'll go to access previous recordings as well as sign up for upcoming webinars. So it should be a one-stop shop to access a lot of these webinar resources. I will say that it usually takes our team about a week's time in order to edit the video and post it to our website. So if you don't see it immediately, that's likely why. Give us a little bit to make sure that we can get it in tip-top shape for you. But then you should be able to see it in about a week's time. And then finally, we do have a survey. So if you have found this webinar to be helpful, or if there are questions that you want us to go into more detail about, please go ahead and give us that feedback. We are continuously tweaking these to make sure that they are as helpful as possible for our incoming students. And I will say that we'll both edit these webinars for next year, but a lot of the feedback that we get via this survey, if we do feel like there are maybe gaps existing in these webinars, we will tweak it and hope to offer it orientation. So please know that if you do want us to go into more detail, we do review that feedback and we do our best to incorporate that information at a later time and make it available to you. Okay, it looks like we have one question through our Q&A feature. And Vanessa, I'm wondering if you can speak to, it looks like the student deferred their enrollment by a year, and they're wondering if they use the same UCSD account that they received last year.
That's a great question. So you should receive some confirmation from admissions that you've been readmitted. I would defer to what information is on your formal admission for fall 2025. I am assuming it is likely that you're using the same account information, but they'll have additional information in your acceptance email and the instructions they give you to ensure that you're able to enroll and start the process of getting ready to study here at UCSD. So I would defer to the communications admissions is sending.
Wonderful. All right. So that looks like that is our questions for today. We hope this was helpful for you. Again, we will see you on Thursday at 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time to talk more about applying for your F1 or your J1 student visa. But until then, take good care and we'll see you next time. Thank you.